First, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Amy Marcos, who is attending this hearing virtually. This is just a continuation of our previous public hearing held last October 5, 2020, on the MUP pension bills referred to this committee, which was suspended with the commitment that an actuarial study would be conducted by the Government Service Insurance System, or GSIS, together with our key stakeholders such as the Bureau of Treasury and the MUPs, among others. Just to refresh our memory, last year and this year's appropriations reflect the veracity of this serious financial concern, given the steep increase in the MUP's pension funding from 80 billion in 2020 to 120 billion under the 2021 General Appropriations Act. Among the many proposals from the Department of Finance is the cancellation of automatic indexation. In this regard, we may have to request for a legal opinion from the Department of Justice on whether or not Congress can diminish or reduce the benefits already being received by existing pensioners, as well as those who are already in the service. Last week, 25 January 2020, our office received the actuarial study of the GSIS on the updated results of funding requirements of the existing retirement scheme of the MUP as of 31 December 2019. The numbers from the updated study tell us that the daunting scenario that the estimated seed fund needed for the proposed pension system is about 9.6 trillion pesos. In order to fund said seed fund, the study suggests that Congress needs to appropriate more than 800 billion annually, or for 20 years, if no changes or reforms are made on the pension system. The yet-to-be-completed actuarial study has also taken into consideration the one-time infusion of the proceeds from the total sales of the MUP assets, which at present is pegged at 14.98 billion, with the note that the that other MUP services have not submitted the appraised and assessed value of their assets. To date, only the PNP, BJMP, Philippine Coast Guard, including the AFP, who submitted the list of their assets just now, have submitted the list of their assets. Now, to give us a clearer picture, we have also invited a representative from the Bureau of Internal Revenue to provide at least the zonal valuations of the various properties. Moving on, the GSIS actuarial study used 27% as the mandatory contributions, of which 18% would come from the government share, while the other 9% is from the MUP's personal share. This figure resulted in a reduction of 5.94% in the total pension requirements. By examining the summary of results of the sensitivity scenarios after excluding the no or limited indexation scenarios, it appears that there are two other schemes that will result in a substantial reduction of the estimated total funding requirements. A, mandating a minimum pensionable age of 56 years of age, and B, pegging the salary increase to only 5% per year rather than 10%. Now, these are among the points of discourse that we wish to center on in today's joint public hearing. With that, the chairperson would like to recognize and acknowledge the presence of our resource persons. Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, I saw him earlier. Represented by Yusek Reynaldo Mapago and Vice Admiral Eric Kagawan. Are you there? Yeah. Secretary Anyo is represented by Undersecretary Bernardo Flores Jr. and Undersecretary Rico Judge Echeverry. The DOJ is represented by Attorney Ana Lisette Manito and Attorney Norlisa Manlangit. The DBM will be represented by Ms. Mary Rose Aguilar and Ms. Mary Joyce Zamora. The DOF is represented by Assistant Secretary Maria Teresa Habitan. The Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, will be represented by Major General Adriano Perez Jr., General Rene Honasan, General Reno Tolentino, and Captain Naida Yoro. This is from the jugs, no? Yeah. The PNP will be represented or is represented by General Roque Eduardo Vega, General Jose Nartates Jr., and Police Executive Master Sergeant Alexander Jimenez. General Sinas is present online, attending online. Also, General Sidney Hernia, the Director of PNP Retirement and Benefits Administration Service, or PRBS. Admiral George Ursabia, Jr. of the Philippine Coast Guard. Alan Soliano of the BJMP. Yan, Director Alan Soliano Iral. And then from the Bucor, Chief Inspector. Anyway, Neil Dionisio Buot. The NAMRIA is represented by Commander Carter S. Lumaang. And the GSIS is represented by Attorney Lucio Yu Jr., Attorney Giovanni Lin Picoy Marin. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly, no? Mr. Geoffrey Reyes. And the Treasurer of the Philippines is a Treasurer, Rosalia De Leon, present, ma'am. Anyway.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So that's it. And the BIR is represented by Mary Gretchen Mondragon. So with that, let us begin. I understand that the AFP, I would like to also welcome the presence of our distinguished minority leader, Senator Franklin De Leon. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the committee hearing. So I understand that the AFP will present the list of their total assets. Are you ready to present? The armed forces of the DND, for that matter, Department of Defense. Who will present?
We are not prepared, Mr. Chairman, because we are just assessing this week the assets, because you called me, I think, late last week, and we need this week to get all the assets all over the Philippines, Mr. Chairman, and we will be ready to present to you sometime this week, maybe Friday.
Thank you, Secretary Del. For that matter, let us hear from the GSIS. So the other members of the committee and the other resource persons will be properly briefed on their actuarial study that they conducted. Please go ahead, GSIS, or the Treasurer.
Mr. Chairman, GSIS will present.
Yes, please, GSIS.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Attorney Lucio Yu. Thank you for inviting GSIS. First, the study on actuarial estimation.
There are some interruptions. Kindly check again your connection.
Okay na, Mr. Chair.
Yes, it's
This morning,
better now.
May I request Ms. Jenny Lopez to present the simulation study? Ms. Jenny?
Hello, good morning. Here we're going to present the additional scenarios on the 2020 study on the retirement scheme of the military and uniformed personnel. The data is based on 2019 year-end data. Next slide, please. So, this study was conducted to update the actuarial study on the existing retirement scheme of the uniformed personnel based on data as of December 31, 2019, taking into consideration a one-time infusion of the proceeds from the total sales of the MUP assets. So this is an additional scenario to the latest study on the total estimated funding requirements, which was presented last December 7, 2020. Next slide, please. So the one-time infusion is based on the following appraised or assessed value of the assets submitted by each branch of service of the MUP. So the PNP have 12.91 billion, the BJMP 2.01 billion, the PCG 0.06 billion, so a total of 14.98 billion. The AFP, BFP, BCOR, and NAMRIA, the data are not yet available. Next slide, please. So the main purpose of the actuarial valuation is to provide an estimate of the liabilities resulting from the retirement system's promised benefits as of a reckoning date. So this includes estimating the total cost of all benefits for active members and pensioners. So the total cost of the expected benefits for all active members and pensioners was estimated by taking the actuarial present value at the valuation date of all future benefits. Next slide, please. So for active members, the actuarial liabilities as of December 31, 2019 is based on the present value of future benefits due to past service plus the present value of future benefits for future service. And for the retirees, the actuarial liabilities as of December 31, 2019 is based on the present value of future pensions. Next, please. So the data used in the study were those which were provided to us by the different branches of services. It must be noted, however, that the results of this actuarial study were based on a specified set of assumptions, like the decrement rates, as well as the interest and the discount rates. Next is the scope and coverage of the study. Next, please. Next slide, please. So, based on the given data, the total active membership of the MUP as of December 31, 2019 is 402,086. Now, 48% of this are from PNP and 37% from the AFP. The average monthly salary is about 39,687. So we see here that the average monthly salary of the AFP, the BJMP, the NAMRIA are above that of the average. And the average years of service of the active members as of year-end 2019 is about 10 years. So the average years of service for the AFP, the BJMP, and the BUCOR is a bit higher than the average. And the average attained age is 35 years old. Next, please. Now, the total regular pensioners as of year-end 2019 total to 196,004, of which 131,115 are retirees from the AFP and 55,563 retirees from PNP. The average monthly pension is 39,520, which approximately more or less approximates the average monthly salary of 39,687. Then the average attained age of the regular pensioners is 64, and the average age at retirement is 48. Next, please. Here we have the total number of survivorship pensioners as of December 31, 2019. So we have a total of 93,172. Coming from AFP, about 52,418, and from the PNP, 36,350. The average monthly pension of the survivorship pensioners is the average pension is about 24,305, and the average attained age is 63. So for this study, we have the following key assumptions. Next slide, please. So for the active members, we have the assumed rates of retirement, disability, separation from service, and death. And for the pensioners, we have the assumed rates of death. Then we have 7% investment rate of return and a salary increase assumption of 10% per year. Next. This slide shows the key assumptions used. So for the benefits based on the existing retirement scheme, then there is no contribution. Also shown here are the decrement rates table used for in the study. And as I've said earlier, a salary increase of 10% and an interest rate of a salary increase of 10% and an interest rate of 7% per annum. Also, the study took into consideration automatic indexation and pension eligibility of 20 years and retirement at next higher rank and a pension based on final salary. These additional scenarios, we also consider the one-time infusion based on the appraised or assessed value of the total assets submitted by each branch of service of MUP, amounting to 14.98 billion. Next, please. Next, please. So here, if we consider the 14.98 billion one-time infusion, the initial funding requirements based on the status quo condition of 9,617 billion will be reduced to 9,602 billion. Next go. So this slide shows the annual amortization of the funding requirements for 20 years, 25, 30, 35, and 40 years. So for example, if we amortize the funding requirements under the scenario with one-time infusion, that is 9,602 billion, the annual amortization for 20 years is about 847 billion. So this is a decrease of about 1.32 billion from the 848.39 billion annual amortizations for 20 years if we consider the status quo condition. Next slide, please. This slide shows the simulated liabilities for the years 2021 to 2026. So this considers a scenario with one-time infusion and the funding requirements amortized for 20 years. So the funding requirement here is based on status quo, which is 9,617 billion. So this simulation also considered the DBM pension projection for the years 2021 to 2026 as shown in row B. And the projected contributions based on from the government's share of 18% of base pay plus longevity pay as shown in row D, and the projected contributions from personal share of 9% of base pay and longevity pay as shown in row E. So for year 2021, we consider the first amortization of 833 billion. Then we less the DBN pension budget for 2021. So we have a total liabilities for the year net of the pension budget of 706 billion. Then if we consider the total projected contribution of 51.70 billion, the total liabilities less contributions for the year is about 654.41. So this is the total liabilities for 2021 that is not covered by the GBM pension budget and the projected contributions for the year. So for 2022, again, here we consider the second amortization of 833 billion. Then we less the DBM pension budget for 2022, which is 133 billion, so a net of 700 billion. And taking into consideration the projected contribution for the year of 56.70 billion, the total liabilities less contributions and the DBM pension budget is about 643 billion. So that is the total liabilities not funded by the pension budget for the year and the projected contributions for the year. Then the accumulated or the cumulative total liabilities as of 2022 is therefore the total liabilities for the year, which is 643 billion, plus the previous year's 654 billion. And we do the math for the following years for 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026. So as of year in 2026, of the amortized amounts, about 3,781 billion are not covered by the DBM pension budget from 2021 to 2026 and the projected contribution for the same period. This is the 3,781 billion. Next, please. So following are the sensitivity scenarios. So this slide shows the sensitivity on interest rates. Now, if we look at the scenario with one-time infusion, the base case is at 7%. So if the interest rate assumption is reduced by 1% to 6%, the funding requirements of 9,602 billion will increase to 12,648 billion. So in general, if we decrease, for every 1% decrease in interest rate, the funding requirement will increase by about 33.88% on the average. And on the other hand, if for every 1% increase in interest rate, the funding requirement will decrease by about 25.15% on the average. Next slide, please. So, this slide shows the sensitivity on salary increase. So if the salary increases at a rate of 5% annually, the total estimated funding requirements would significantly decrease by 62.86%, or that's 6,045.61 billion. So given the total appraised or assessed value of 14.98 billion, the funding requirements would further decrease to 3,556 billion, or 63.02% from the initial results of 9,617 billion. Next slide, please. This slide shows the sensitivity on varying types of indexation. So the base case is with full indexation. So under the scenario with one-time infusion, if we have the indexation, the funding requirements of 9,602 billion will be reduced to 4,779, which is about 50.22%. And if no indexation, the funding requirements will be reduced by about 68.22%. So from 9,602 billion to 3,052 billion. And if we assume no indexation, but then we assume a 1.5% pension increase, the funding requirements will be reduced to 3,401 billion. So that is about 64.58% from the 9,602 funding requirements based on full indexation. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the varying membership application of indexation. So the base case is the indexation is applied to active members and pensioners. So under the scenario with one-time infusion, the funding requirements is, as I've said, 9,602 billion. If we apply the indexation to pensioners only, the funding requirements will be reduced to 4,639 billion. So that's a reduction of about 51.68%. And as I mentioned earlier, no indexation is about 3,052 3,052 billion. Next slide, please. This slide shows the amortization of the funding requirements if we consider the automatic indexation applied to existing pensioners only. So,
Mag-switch na ako dito.
applied to pensioners only. So, here we see that for 20-year amortization, annual amortization under scenario A, which considers wherein we did not consider the one-time infusion, the 20-year annual amortization is 410 billion, a decrease of 437 billion from the original amortization based on the status quo of 848 billion. But then if we consider scenario B, the 20-year amortization is about 409 billion. Next slide, please. This slide shows the sensitivity if we consider the actual rank of the member at retirement. So, the impact of this is a reduction of about 5.9% from the 9,602 billion funding requirements. So, this is reduced to 9,035 billion. Now, if we consider a contribution rate of 27%, the funding requirements with one-time infusion, the funding requirements will be reduced to 9,013 billion, which is a decrease of about 6.13%. Next slide, please. Here, the current retirement age of the MUP is 56 years. Now, if we assume 60 years as the retirement age, the funding requirement will increase slightly by 0.97%. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows the effect of the imposition of a minimum pensionable age of 56. So, given a compulsory retirement age of 56, the MUP will receive his or her pension upon reaching the age of 56. So, under this scenario, with one-time infusion, the funding requirement of 9,602 billion will be reduced by 40.76%. So to 5,000, that's 5,687 billion. Next slide, please. This slide shows the summary of the sensitivity scenarios that we have seen earlier. In this slide, this did not consider the one-time infusion. So the impact of no indexation, is that's 68.11%. So a reduction from 9,617 billion to 3,000 to 3,052. Then, based on actual rank, the funding requirements will be reduced by about 6.04%. And if you use the minimum amount of pension of the AFP of 90% of base pay and longevity pay, the funding requirement will increase by about 2.21%. And if we adopt the age of retirement of 60, the funding requirements will increase by slightly by about 0.82%. Also, in this slide, the annual amortization for 20 years, 25, 30, 35 years, and 40 years are presented. So, in scenario 5 is just a combination of scenarios 1 to 4. That's no indexation, based on actual rank, maximum amount of pension of AFP of 90%, and age of retirement at 60. So the funding requirement will be reduced by about 69%. Then, if we consider a 27% contribution, this will be further reduced. The reduction is about 75.28%. Now, another combination is scenario 7, which combines scenarios 2 to 4. Ito po ay walang, yung no indexation ay hindi considered here. So, for scenario 7, the funding requirement will be reduced only by about 4.28%. And if we consider scenario 7 plus 27 contributions, the funding requirement will be reduced by 10.22%. Then, if we apply the minimum pensionable age of 56, the funding requirements will be reduced by 40.86%. And if we maintain a salary increase of 5%, the funding requirements will be reduced by 63.02%. Next slide, please. This slide is similar to the earlier slide, but this one considers the one-time infusion. So, for this, scenario 5 is the combination of scenarios 1 to 4, no indexation, actual rank, maximum amount of 90%, and retirement age at 60. So the funding requirement, there's a reduction of 69.34%. So that's from 9,602 billion to 2,948 billion. And if you consider the 27% contribution, this will be further reduced to 2,377 billion. So that's a reduction of 75.28% from the 9,602 billion. And for scenario 7, this is a combination of scenarios 2 to 4. The reduction in the funding requirements is 4.28%. So that's from 9,602 billion to 9,205 billion. And if you less the contributions, is further reduced to 8,634 billion. So that's a reduction of 10.22% from 9,602 billion. So if we apply the minimum pensionable age of 56, then this is a reduction of 40.86%. So that's from 9,602 billion, it will now be 5,687 billion. And a salary increase of 5% assumption will reduce the funding requirements by about 63.02%. That's also.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, GSIS. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. No matter how we look at the numbers, considering all the scenarios presented, talagang overwhelming. But, you know, we really have to confront this. As Senator Drilon would often remark, as of now, we don't know how to resolve this issue. In fact, yun nga, different scenarios as presented, you know, parang masira ang ulo natin lahat dito how to resolve this issue. Yes, Minority Leader, Senator Drilon.
Yes, Mr. Chair, with due indulgence, allow me to intervene. First, let me acknowledge the effort put by the GSIS in trying to figure out a way out of this very messy situation. You know, this problem has been swept under the rugs for decades. And at least now we have a chairman of our committee who's willing to confront it. That is the first step to solving the problem. And I think, Mr. Chair, the role of the Senate and Congress, for that matter, being a policy body, is to make a policy on this. Is it our policy to ultimately integrate and fund under a funded retirement plan or a funded retirement fund, the retirement plan of our men in uniform, military personnel in uniform? So if the answer is yes, at least we have the GSIS who will provide us with the technical assistance. Mr. President, I'm telling I am confused, but at the same time concerned about what we have heard. But again, this is a technical presentation. To be candid, it is difficult to absorb this in the 30 minutes that it was presented. May I suggest something, if the chair will accept it? As the next step, knowing if the chair will agree with the policy thrust that we should have, whether we should relieve our national budget of the annual burden, which is getting heavier and heavier every year, and move it to a funded retirement program, whether with the GSIS or another fund. I would like, if I may put forward, if our policy is really to move this out of our national budget, then I would propose that the GSIS advise us first what is the most realistic assumption. There are so many assumptions made, and since this is a very technical issue, I am submitting to the chair the following. First, that GSIS gives us or recommends to us what is the most realistic assumption. And given what is the most realistic assumption from where they stand, they give us the most feasible plan and the estimated funding requirement. If we have agreed on that, and then so we go back and present and go back and say, all right, this is what is recommended by the technical people as the most realistic assumption, and under that scenario, this is the funding requirement. And that is my suggestion in order to be able to move forward. But let me place on the record, Mr. Chair, that this presentation goes a long way into starting to find a solution to this very difficult problem. That's my submission to the chair, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Drilon.
Mr. Chair,
As a footnote, while we really give credit to the GSIS for making this the whole scenarios, different sensitivity scenarios, but this actuarial study is yet to be completed. Why? Because other MUP services have failed to submit
also.
the list of their total assets. So they just relied on the submission of 14.98 billion as submitted by the PNP, BJMP. And I'd like to hear from the AFP. Of course, the AFP submitted just now. We received the list of their assets today because I gave Secretary Lorenzana a call last week if they can at least submit before we start the hearing today. Now, the BFP, and we'd like to find out from them because as I remember it correctly, during our last hearing, last October 25, they committed to submit to the committee the list of their assets. And GSIS and the Bureau of Treasury cannot complete whatever actuarial study they will conduct unless they have a complete picture of the so-called one-time infusion. So am I correct with my observation, GSIS, na pagkulang ang data, hindi rin kompleto yung actuarial studies ninyo, di ba? Yes, Senator Drilon.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we need that data from the AFP and the other offices, which would have assets in order to support this the funding requirement. My submission, Mr. Chair, is that this is absolutely necessary so that we will know what is the initial available assets for the initial funding requirement. And I underscore initial. So that once we know what is the initial funding requirement and we know what is the initial available assets that can be used for this initial funding requirement, then we will know how much we have to provide in the national budget over a period of time, given what is recommended to us to be a realistic assumption and a including which would include all the pension requirements, etc. My submission, Mr. President, is that for purposes of the actuarial requirement, the assets would affect the initial funding requirement. The total requirement or the total liabilities over the years would be determined by the age of retirement, by the salaries, by the initial, by the automatic increases, retirement age, etc. But I would repeat, the assets is critically needed to assist us in determining what is the initial funding requirement that would have to be funded in the budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, yung seed fund pa lamang, ang requirement is 9.6 trillion. And this was validated by the briefing, ano? And in order to fund that seed fund, yung study nila suggests that Congress needs to appropriate more than 800 billion annually for 20 years kung standalone, kung magre-rely lang sa GAA. So that's the reason why the GSIS came up with different scenarios for Congress to consider. Ano yung best scenario? As you rightly suggested and asked, ano yung best scenario that would fit into this difficult situation, to solve the difficult situation? Now, I'd like to hear first from, of course, AFP nagsabit today, ano? BFP. Why did you fail to submit in spite of your commitment last October 25? BFP, may we hear from you? And after BFP,
Chairman.
Bucor and Amria. Anong reason
Sorry.
ninyo?
Mr. Chairman, si Amy po, andito ako.
Yes, Senator Amy. Yes, you have the floor.
We had a BICAM, but I was monitoring the presentation of the GSIS, and I await the presentation of the BFP and the other delayed presentations. Nevertheless, I think, as Senator Drilon and yourself have continually bemoaned, the truth is that we keep kicking this can down the road. Siguro, hindi naman na premature na ipresenta na ito sa ating economic managers. Ngayon pa lang para makita nila yung extent ng problema, because it's no use to a degree. It's a pointless exercise churning out all the numbers when there's no seriety or commitment on the part of our economic managers to finally grapple with this problem. I think GSIS has already regurgitated sufficient data and information to make a preliminary presentation to our economic managers through Secretary Lorenzana as well as the chairman, para once and for all malaman natin kung talagang bubunuin na natin itong problemang to o talagang patumpik-tumpik lang at laging pinopostpone. Sana siguro dapat magka-meeting na yung ating mga heads.
Thank you, Senator Amy. So, BFP, i-modify ko yung question ko. When can you submit the list of your assets? And when do you submit, I would suggest that you furnish the BIR, particularly yung kanilang asset valuation division or unit, ano? Para isang parang one-time computation na lang, and this data could be submitted to GSIS para makompleto yung kanilang actual study. AFP, I would suggest the same, na yung sinabit ninyo sa committee, bigyan nyo na ng kopya yung BIR para magsabay-sabay na, simultaneously, magkaroon na ng valuation sa mga assets na nilista ninyo. So, BFP, Bucor, and Namria, when can you submit? We'd like to hear from you. BFP first.
Yes, sir. We will be submitting the consolidated list on Friday, sir.
When you submit to the committee, isubmit nyo na rin yung kopya, isang kopya sa BIR.
Yes, sir.
Please, okay? And also to GSIS, i-copy-furnish nyo na lahat para in the next hearing, kumpleto na yung ipipresent dito sa committee. Because this is, problema natin lahat ito. This is not just a problem of the Congress, of the Senate, and of the committee. No, sa amin, ang easy way out is cancel automatic indexation, period. Would you like that to happen? That's the suggestion and submission of the DOF. Easy way out, cancel automatic indexation. Wala na. So, Friday, Bucor, when can you submit your list of assets?
Sir, Friday, sir. Can we be given until Friday, Your Honor?
Okay. That's a commitment that you should comply with, ha? Kasi last time, ganyan din sinabi nyo. Sabi nyo, 1 week eh. Namria.
Good morning, sir. Friday rin, sir.
So I will repeat, bigyan nyo na rin ng kopya yung BIR. We invited them here. Sila kasi yung gagawa ng valuation for submission to GSIS para makompleto because we cannot see the whole picture eh. Ang nakita lang natin, ang assumption, ang premise is a one-time infusion of 14.98. And then from there, nagawa ng mga maraming scenarios. So pag kumpleto yung submission, mas accurate yung mga scenarios na ipipresent ng GSIS. And assuming that you, BIR, assuming that you receive the list from this MUP services, when can you finish the evaluation for submission to GSIS? BIR, please. BIR. Okay, while waiting for the BIR to respond, GSIS, assuming that you have all the data from all the MUPs and the evaluation has been submitted by BIR, gaano katagal nyo may present uli sa committee yung completed scenarios? GSIS, please.
About 3 weeks, sir, upon receipt of all the information.
Thank you. That's reassuring enough. And as a matter of fact, may track record naman kayo to complete the actual study that passed. Ano? So, question, yung kaninang ni-raise ko, for DOJ, meron ba tayong legal problem and we need your legal opinion on this? Ano? Meron ba tayong problema if we diminish or reduce the pension or the amount that the pensioners are presently receiving?
Good morning po, Senator Lacson.
Yes, DOJ.
Yes po, right now po, we defer answering the question as our position, draft position paper is still subject to review. And once signed, we will just submit for official position paper on the matter.
Understand, may mga jurisprudence naman dito. And yes, we will defer to your legal opinion once it is submitted to the committee. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you po, sir.
Sa GSIS, anong basis nyo doon sa ginamit nyo doon sa 27%? And also, going further, yung 18 and 9%, paki-enlighten lang yung committee, ano yung naging basis nyo for using 27% as the mandatory contribution, tapos 18% would come from the government share, while 9% sa MUP. Ano lang, for our enlightenment.
The 9% po is based on, parehas lang po siya yung sa ating mga civilian, that's the 9%. So, yung 18% so ni kumbaga sa government share po nakapatong the rest na 18%. But then, this is based po dun sa mga proposals na nakita namin, yung 27%.
Ma'am, don't get me wrong. We're not questioning the wisdom. Gusto lang namin ma-enlighten nga kung bakit yung mga numero nyo ginamit, bakit nyo ginamit yung mga numero na yun. Thank you.
So, the 9% po is based, parehas lang po siya doon sa ating civilian contribution, which is yung employee share na 9%. Then, yung 18% po, for the government share, which is kung yung counterpart po siya ng civilian na government share, nagdagdag po doon ng additional premium to take into consideration yung hazards ng bali po, doon po siya sa government po siya kumbaga, yung burden po ng additional contributions na hindi ma-assume ng member is nasa government po.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, the bill filed by Senator Bongo, and he took this up with me yesterday while we were in the session hall. If new entrants to the service will be the only ones covered, or yun yung kailangan lang to establish this seed fund, anong impact naman ito? How much will be appropriated per year by the national government? Kung yung new entrants lang ang mako-cover, ma'am. Ano lang? Top of head lang.
Sir, pag-aaralan pa po namin yon.
Significant ba yung magiging effect kung new entrants lang? Because that's one portion of the bills referred to the committee.
Kasi po sir, ko-consider po doon yung salaries of the new entrants. Also, if ano po yung profile ng new entrants natin. So, kasama po yun doon sa mga titingnan to come up with the funding requirements if you consider only the new entrants.
I have here some data, ma'am, yung creation of new position, yung actual 2019 is 4 billion ba ito? So this is 4 billion 332 million 381. So kung kukunin natin yung 9%, ang mako-contribute nila something like wala pang 400, thereabouts, mga 400 million. Based on that data, ano yung magiging impact, ma'am? You don't have to give us numbers, no? Paki-describe nyo lang ano magiging impact sa present scenarios that you provided.
So, bali po, yung 400 million is the contribution of the employer, of the MUP member to the fund. So, bali po, yung 400 million is the contributions from the new entrant.
Meron yata naka-unmute dyan, narinig sa background from the other participants. Yes, kindly respond.
So, bali po, the 400 million is the contribution coming from the members. The new entrants.
Ma'am, may construction ba dyan sa lugar ninyo?
Pasensya na po, meron pong gumagawa dito.
Okay, sige, we understand. Okay, sige. Narinig
Pasensya
naman
na
namin
po,
kayo.
sorry.
Alright, we understand.
Pasensya na po. But then, regarding po doon sa new entrance, titingnan na lang po namin as to the impact. Pasensya na po at minimoy sa aking background.
Yung sa AFP RSBS, yung submission ninyo last September 25, merong total assets amounting to 16.72 billion. Yung total liabilities, 7.91. Of course, hindi ito naka-input do sa actuarial study. So may we hear from the AFP RSBS? DND na lang.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is
Yes.
Lieutenant General Barnisa, retired, the EVP of APRSBS.
Go ahead.
Yes, the submission we have actually, that is correct. We have 16.7 billion total assets with liabilities of 7.91 billion, Mr. Chair. And that is not yet included in the submission of DND or AP.
Yeah, thank you. So I would suggest that you also include that in the submission of the DND, no? AFP DND, do sa mga total assets, including all other assets that would be made available para lang makumpleto natin yung lahat ng data para pag-submit ng actuarial study ng GSIs talagang complete and accurate. Can we do that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
DOF, do you have any comment? Aside from the total cancellation of the indexation, what other scenarios can you consider?
Mr. Chair, may I defer to the treasurer for our response?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Leah. So, Mr. Chair, we've seen already the ballooning impact of the pension if we do not address this issue right away and we do not act now. Just to highlight, when we first did the actuarial study in using the 2016 database of the military and uniformed personnel, the unfunded liability then was just 5 trillion. So now that we're using the 2019 database, it has already ballooned to 9.6 trillion. So we really have to have this as a front and center issue that we have to confront. And again, we reiterate that we should already address this head-on with the removal of the indexation. Because if you will see, the unfunded liability, sir, it would be reduced by more than 2/3 from 9.6 trillion to about 3 trillion if we already cancel the automatic indexation. Plus, of course, we reiterate that there should really be the mandatory contribution by our military and uniformed personnel. So, can work together with the committee and, of course, again, with GSIS and, of course, all the MUP units to be able to come up with our unified position also on this very compelling issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leah. Just to underscore the enormity of the problem, as I mentioned earlier, yung 2020 GAA, 80 billion yung nandun. Pag-submit natin o pag-approve ng 2021 GAA, it jumped to 120 billion. So, ganun talaga. And this will, continuously increase in the coming years. So, you are correct in saying na kailangan i-confront natin ngayon to. No? We cannot wait for the 2022 budget without resolving the issues involved. So, Secretary Del, ano may contribute natin from the NDAFP?
Yes, sir. My comment, sir, is that when we were crafting this bill 3 years ago with Secretary Sani Dominguez, ang gusto nilang mangyari is that this will be a pension fund that is will be funded for the next maybe 30 years, because this law will apply only to the new new entrants. So if the law is passed this year and the new entrants will be covered by this maybe after 30 years, so yun ang ating target na 9 trillion yan. Now, the actuarial did it also consider the increases on the salary through the years. Kasi kung akyat na akyat yung ating salary, then maakyat din yung pension. So for the removal of the indexation, sir, I think that will be possible, but let us put something in the law that will also increase the pension of the pensioners based on the price index, maybe 5% of the what corresponds to the inflation. Hindi na automatic indexation, but based on inflation para hindi naman masyadong maiwan yung pension nila kung umaakyat. So we will submit to you, Mr. Chairman, our position again because the AFP is requesting that the AFP should have its own pension plan. Hindi kasama because AFP is military and the others are civilian agencies. We do our duties 24 hours a day. We also assign to any areas, and if there is mission abroad of the there is a war or whatever, the AFP will be there. Now, ang isa pa, Mr. Chairman, is that the AFP strength is not population-based, but fleet-based. The strength now is 147,000, but if we are able to solve the insurgency, we can reduce that by half. So, yun ang gusto mangyari ng AFP, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. DILG? Your take, DILG or PNP?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Lieutenant General Binag, sir, the Deputy Chief PNP for Operations, representing the Chief PNP. Sir, considering our position for the prospective application, this law would be passed. And so therefore, this will only be applied to the new entrants. And considering also that we have been discussing this for the past how many years, and we have been recruiting on the average of 6 to 10,000 recruits or new entrants annually, and this adds up to the pressure do sa computation, sir, na ginawa nung GSIS kanina. So I think, sir, there's an urgency. Of course, this has to be discussed with our NAPOLCOM Chair, Secretary Anyo, and the PNP leadership. If we can, sir, immediately put a, shall we say, a cut-off na para, sir, every time na may madadagdag na new entrance, hindi na siya makakadagdag dun sa additional computation ng dito nga, sir, sa pension. Kung halimbawa, sir, 4 years nang dinidiscuss to, 10,000, so 40,000, sir, yung nadagdag, kaya lumakas talaga yung pressure doon sa kanina sa present. So at least meron tayong immediate, sir, na may babawas doon sa mga papasok, sir, na bagong police. Yun, sir, ang isang pwedeng pag-aralan, of course, subject to approval ng aming sir, ng aming DILG secretary. Then I don't know if that is also applicable doon naman sa madadagdag na retiree, sir. Hindi ko alam, sir, yung legality noon. Parang ang kinokontrol natin, sir, yung mga additional na new entrants saka additional na pensioners. So meantime that we are solving yung kung saan natin kukunin tong pondo na, sir. So yun, sir, yung initial take ko, sir, doon sa study na ginawa ng sir, ng GSIS. Yun lang muna, sir. Thank you, sir.
How about the elimination of the, saan ba natin nakopya yung one rank higher? May impact din yun eh. Maski not really substantial, pero may impact din. Bakit ba kailangan pag nag-retire ang pension one rank higher?
Hindi ko po alam ang history.
May comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Chairman.
Yes, Secretary.
I think, Mr. Chairman, when this law was passed, yung one rank higher was in 1979. And considering that the salary of the military and the police was so small, I think that was one way of for the government to at least pag nag-retire ang tao, meron naman siyang kunting pera dagdag. But as far as I'm concerned, at present, hindi na kailangan yung one rank higher, Mr. Chairman.
Correct. Kasi adjusted naman yung mga salaries na eh.
Malaki na yung sweldo.
Yeah. Yes. Ako, wala akong problema. Wala naman akong warrant hire eh. Anyway, sige. Levity aside, sino pa ba yung... Who wants to give his input ba?
Mr.
From-
Chair, this is Gretchen from the BIR.
Yeah, Gretchen, please.
Yes, initially, you needed
Are
the
you with the
valuation.
asset valuation unit of the BIR?
No, I'm with the Commissioner's Office actually and the Law Division. But
Okay, please proceed.
yeah, we received a part, I think not all, right? The properties that for validation. But the thing is, we do not know whether the property is classified as residential or commercial. So we are not able to provide the correct valuation. So when the list is provided to us, we would appreciate it if the classification is given to us also.
Please take note, MUPs. When you submit, indicate nyo na kung residential or commercial so they can, you won't make it difficult for them to make the evaluation.
Thank you.
Yeah. For that matter, even those who have already submitted to the GSIS, magsabit na uli kayo sa BIR indicating therein kung yun nga, yung classification ng property or properties listed. Cesar?
Mr. Chair? Yes, sir. Yung tanong nyo dun sa one rank higher, nasa provision, sir, ng RA 8551, yung aspeto na yun, sir.
Thank you for the information. So, I guess, kung tutuloy natin yung hearing, kulang naman yung data, we cannot finish anything yet. So, we might as well wait for the submission of the data to the BIR and the GSIS, and then we'll schedule another hearing, hopefully after 3 weeks or at least after 3 weeks, so we can have the clear picture, the whole picture of particularly do sa one-time infusion, magamit ng GSIS do sa kanilang actuarial study. So with that, Senator Drilon, do you still have some matters to take up?
I am, for the record, I support the proposals of the chairman. We must be able to move forward. We have barely, a year, 1 year to finish this, both in the Senate and the House. And if we drop the ball here, this problem will be there again for the next years, and it will be worse. It will become worse and worse. So I would support the proposition of the chair to press for all the data to be in, and let's put our heads together. What is the best solution given all the conditions that we see today, so that we can help balance help in the funding of this retirement of our military uniformed personnel. And I would repeat, we have barely a year, Mr. Chairman, to pass this bill into law, and I would support the effort of the chairman to press forward and have this problem solved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. You said it all. So with that, we will suspend the hearing, and you will be notified as to when is our next hearing. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Senator Drilon.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please. Did you just say thank you?
Yes, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.